shuffling up, we might as well. It's interesting, right? Wrath of the Skies is a card I thought Wrath of the Skies is, done well. That's been a good one. So I don't know. I'll tell you this, and this is one that's seen a little bit of play. I thought people would like Psychic Frog because I thought, ha ha he he, funny joke, pretty good
joke,
card.
Yep.
And it was one of the first cards previewed, and people would just come up to me and they'd be like, masterpiece, the greatest match. And I'm like, oh wow, we really like
Psychic Frog. That much, huh?
Yeah, like I thought it was like a solid card, like thought it would see some play. And like in the right world could definitely be an all-star, but did not expect it to be this like fan favorite card. So
that all right, we are off, Mason. So Nikachu, the 1 seed, on the play, leading off with Rashad and Dakian. I got that one mixed up. And we'll see what Johnny's hand looks pretty good. I see a whole bunch of blue cards. Now, this particular matchup, maybe the blue cards aren't quite as good. Cards like Cavernous Souls and Aether Vial can really mess with those counter spells. But there is a spell snare here for Johnny. If Nikachu does not have a cavern, it looks like we do not, Otawara Mutavault, then maybe that spell snare, maybe that spell snare can actually find a good target.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting too, because Nikachu has the Flash Lord and Vodakan Hexcatcher, and he's just gets to attack, and currently Spell Snare is causing a lot of problems, but if Johnny fetches to like grab a Surveil land or something, then Nikachu can flash in that Lord, and you see Johnny playing around it. Yeah, and I love it. He's been so patient with everything this weekend, and it's just like, nope, I don't need to fetch. I can just take my draw step, play my land, slowly but surely get my value while I can. See him going in the tank a little bit. We've seen Johnny do this a couple times where he kind of takes a second, thinks through everything, and then it kind of just goes, which I really respect, kind of just making sure we're not missing something before we do something we might regret, especially in such a big spot. Not only is $2,400 on the line right now from this W, but also, I mean, the PTQ from being our Players Championship, 24-person tournament, chance to play the Pro Tour, that has $35,000 in prizes. I mean, winning this match is like minimum another $1,000, like the bare minimum. So not to mention the chance to be the Players Champion.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Johnny has just been playing very, very, very well all day. And you know what? Even Johnny had, at least I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Johnny had the cap the front way in the last match. And I got to say, Mason, we moved the cap to the back. That means Johnny means business.
Yeah. He's ready to fight Capitan as Spell Snare comes down. It's going to most likely answer. I can't imagine Nikachu would force negation back unless he just had some absolutely terrible card. And that is not the case here. So he's going to get to potentially untap. Looks like Johnny dropped a card. Got to say, strong weekend for J.O. names, So, all right. Mutavault, the pickup for the turn. And
J.O. names, but no Fletcher Johnson.
So true. As we are going to figure out exactly what we're going to do here with this Mutavault. We have Otawara and Mutavault as our lands. If we play Otawara, we can play one of our lords, and push damage. Or if we play Mutavault, we maybe unlock pushing, some more damage on a future turn. Maybe we want to attack for 3. A lot of different options available for Nikachu here. And you see him taking his time. This is an untimed finals, and these early turns matter a ton when it comes to his sequencing and threats.
Yeah, and we see another Rashad and Dakian. I mean, are we about to just like, I don't know if Nikachu has another play here. We might just be starting to get into the point where we're just going to start porting, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's what he's doing. And he's saying, hey, Johnny, you want to fetch a Surveil land? You're going to get tapped down. I see Johnny smirk there for a second. He's like, yep, I'll pay it. No, pay it.
And right. What I find funny about this is I think Johnny didn't fetch because he was maybe playing around. Or no, because I did. Yeah, the Dakian attacked that turn. But yeah, I mean, now that Johnny has decided to go ahead and crack that fetch land, Nikachu's just going to say, okay, well, we're going to start taxing some mana. Now, I think there's a Wrath of the Skies in hand. So that potentially at some point down the road could be able to get both of those Dakians, maybe something like Tune the Narrative, and then even after a Dakian taps a land, you can still just cast the Wrath of the Skies for 2 mana, X = 0, but use the energy that you already had floating.
Yeah, and we're seeing a shock here, and I was curious to see, would we see something like maybe preordained in order to get that Tune the Narrative you talked about? Maybe a Galvanic Discharge, right? Galvanic Discharge, you don't even have to spend the energy if you don't want to, right? You could just be like, yeah, X is 0. Probably wouldn't want to do that, but you could. So Nikachu here, gonna have to line it up. The Merfolk's champion. Can he go the distance?
Vile, Lord of Atlantis, and Harbinger, I think, with the Otawara.
Mm-hmm. So
could potentially just go for a Harbinger this turn.
And yeah, you saw Nikachu in the last round of the top 4, excuse me. He just basically locked Ryan Bellamy's with the Jeskai control deck out. And he talked about us with the interview when he won what essentially was his winning in. He's like, yeah, this Harbinger has been kind of mid, but against the control decks, it's insane.
Yeah, and what's funny about this is but Bellamy had access to Solitude, so even though Bellamy didn't, all of Bellamy's lands were islands, was still able to pitch cast that Solitude. Unfortunately for Johnny does not have access to that card. So, I mean, does have a Scalding Tarn, so can potentially go for fetch basic mountain and then potentially top deck a Galvanic Discharge. But we also know that there's a counterspell in Johnny's hand too.
Yeah, this is such an interesting thing here. So you see Nikachu play the Aether Vial, a very good bait spell. Maybe gets a counter spell even, right? It got the Force of Negation, discard the Preordain. So now Nikachu's like, okay, if I slam this Harbinger, will I get him? Now, worth noting, Nikachu could also just pass, tap down the mana on Johnny's turn, pass to himself, main phase 1, tap down a land, and then untap. Move to his main phase 2 once the mana disappears, and then play the Harbinger. And yeah, it looks like that's what he's doing. I love this play from Nikachu. He's just going to tap down these lands and just be like, I'm going to force Johnny into a very awkward position.
Yep. And then, I mean, I guess the Scalding Tarn messes with that, where if you go Rashad and Dockhand down the Scalding Tarn, Johnny fetches for an untapped land. Nikachu goes to second main. Like if Johnny has another untapped land, right?
Well, it has to be a double fetch, because if Johnny plays like a Steam Vents like he has in hand, you just tap that down. And even if he does have that, if Nikachu draws a land, then he can tap down again, before he like switches phases. So
this is kind of the first time that we've seen this Rashad and Dockhand plus Harbinger of the Seas combo, but it really, really looks effective, Mason, where you get these greedy mana bases and you just say, okay, I'm going to tap your lands down, cut you off a counterspell, and just slam this Haymaker threat that, again, Johnny can fetch a basic mountain and does have 4 discharge, but has to draw that discharge, does not have it in the hand currently.
Yeah, and, Nikachu picked up Sink into Stupor, which is a land. So had this been a fetch, he could have played around the play you talked about. But here, I think he's just double checking his work. He's like, if I do this, will it be good enough?
Oh, I love this, because what's funny about this play is Johnny might fetch the Scalding Tarn to get a basic island so he can hold up the counterspell. But then Nikachu can just go tap your other land, play my third land, play Harbinger, and now you don't have red mana.
Get ready for a best of NRG live moment, baby, because this one's going down in the history books. And I think you're 100% right. Or if Johnny goes for a shock land, right? Yep. And just, it's just like, whatever. Oh, and look at that. Ooh. He has the mountain. He knows he can use
patience.
Well, the Mystic Gate can hit filter. I always forget.
It
can filter it.
Off of what?
Well, can the Mystic Gate, is it colorless, or does it have to be blue or white?
No, it has to be blue or white. So you can't. So okay. Johnny is giving up counterspell this turn because he's under the assumption, and maybe Johnny is like realizing what's going to happen. Is like, okay, if I get basic island and he just taps my other land and has another land in hand, then that play is kind of pointless, and I'm blocked out of red sources. So Johnny realizing, okay, worst case scenario, he has the Harbinger. I need the red mana to be able to top deck either Plains for Flage or the Discharge.
Yeah, and I think Nikachu's double checking. Like, there's no like Aether Spikes or whatever. He's going to stick this, and I think, you see the smile from Johnny. He's like, it sticks, and he knows he is now under pressure with a 4-turn clock here. Now, if he draws, anything reasonable, he have it.
He drew the Discharge. Okay. Now we're
I think he has Discharge and Flame of Anora in hand. Ooh. So
right. Okay.
He does have a kill spell here, but he might want to, he might choose to play around Force Negation. We'll have to see how he wants to do this.
Yeah, you could even go Discharge the Harbinger, and then I guess you can go Discharge the Harbinger and then Wrath for 2 or Wrath for 1. Sorry.
Nope.
Okay, I'm just gonna go for Flame.
Yeah, Nikachu there just like, yep, that's gone. Doesn't, posture or force negation, kind of knows that'd be the case. And this is an interesting spot here where Nikachu has Sink into Stupor. That, sort of a somewhat good disruptive element, but only when you're really far ahead. And he's ahead right now, but not really far ahead. And that's going to get you.
There is a Lord, though. So Nikachu plays the Lord. Johnny fights over it with Counterspell. Animate Mutavault hit for 4, put Johnny to 8. And I'm guessing that's what's probably going to happen. Yep, so there's the Lord. Presumably that gets fought over. I guess Johnny could let it resolve and then just Wrath. But you are taking an extra 3 damage, right? Because you let this resolve, then you take 7 as opposed to 4.
The Mutavault's get animated too, or a Mutavault gets animated, excuse me. So it's tough.
And then you're in a position where if you take that extra 3 damage, then I guess it doesn't change the clock versus just the 2 Mutavaults. So yeah, I think Johnny maybe just let it resolve.
Reasonable spot to be. And you mentioned how Johnny put his hat backwards. If Nikachu is close to a Pikachu, Johnny's trying to catch him.
You know what we might do here? We might just discharge the Mutavault.
Yeah, and just Stone Rain.
And then just Wrath.
Yeah, that's a totally reasonable line.
Yeah, I think I actually like that a little bit better because you're basically, if you could kill the Lord of Atlantis to prevent 3 damage, but you could also kill the Mutavault to also prevent 3 damage. So you're taking the same amount of damage either way. And this way you get the Mutavault and then you just get the Wrath everything else.
Yep. And the only way this can go bad is a Flare of Denial. But if there's a Flare, then your Wrath's resolving. So you're pretty happy about that. And yeah, Johnny's going to take 4 down to 8, I believe. And Nikachu, it's going to put the Stupor onto the battlefield tapped, realizing he needs the mana on the following turns. Well, it looks like this one. He's just going to, yeah. This might be a play to play around Tameo or something.
Oh, because his last card's Dismember. Okay.
Yeah, just like if the Tameo is going to block the Lord, because the Lord doesn't have Island Walk, then that's a way for him to sneak through potentially lethal. Now we know it's a Wrath of the Skies. For X is 2.
So all those little fishies go back into the ocean. And Nikachu not really left with a lot else here. 8 life versus a Mutavault. And Johnny also top deck a second discharge. So Johnny even has the Mutavault covered.
Yep. Flare of the Nile's the draw.
Rough timing on that one.
Oh my goodness. Had that been yeah, you see Nikachu's like, if I had this one last turn, I'd be in pretty good shape. But now I've just got to, try to figure out if I can win. And can I even beat Johnny if he has a discharge? That's kind of what's going through Nikachu's head. If I don't attack with this Mutavault, can I ever attack with it? And he's passing. Thinks he can do it.
I gotta say, this has been like this game and the sequencing from Johnny has been really, really perfect here. Just like the turn, those early turns where Nikachu was trying to like Rashad and Dockhand and get him to maybe fetch for a basic island to hold up counterspell. Johnny didn't fall for the bait. He ended up just getting the basic mountain. Just very, very well played here by Johnny and very well sequenced.
Yeah, and you see Nikachu, you drew a 5th land, so you animated the Mutavault. Galvanic Discharge happened, and he's just going to hold up Flare Denial and Dismember.
Didn't fight over the Flare. I guess maybe we're holding it for Flashback Flage maybe later on. And Johnny did draw a Flage.
Yeah, maybe trying to have an answer for a Snapcaster. If that were there'd be maybe a Snap Attune line or something. So, and this is the awkward part. Yeah, you want to counter the escaped half? By all means.
You don't really want to counter this one. But even if you counter the flashback, I mean, Johnny has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 cards in the graveyard. So you're going to lose 5 to get the Flage back. Still 3 in the graveyard. Once you convert those 2 spells in hand, that's just going to be the flashback of Flage again. So this is Nikachu. I don't want to call it over yet, but it's going to be, I don't know if I see a way out for Nikachu.
And you see Johnny just so patient once again. He drew that Snapcaster Mage, and it's like, I don't need to lower my counterspell shields.
I had no reason to.
Yeah.
Got plenty of stuff available, holding up Counterspell, holding up Snap Flame of Anor. Probably just let this go and just go Snap Flame, kill your thing, draw 2. But I guess that maybe plays into Force of Negation and or Flare of Denial a little bit worse.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to see something like Snap Discharge. because then he doesn't tap out of Counterspell. And
Yeah.
Johnny refuses to tap out of Counterspell.
If there's a Counterspell in his hand, then 2 mana will always be untapped.
Mm-hmm. And you see Nikachu's kind of thinking about it. It's like, am I supposed to fight over this Snapcaster Mage? And it's a pretty reasonable thing to do. You know, the Snapcaster is assuredly going to, you know, cast some removal spell, whether it's Flame or Discharge, you're not sure. And then the Snapcaster will be around later for it to kind of pressure you. Now, the question is, will Johnny use a counterspell to fight over or fight for the Snapcaster Mage?
Yeah, my guess is you probably just go counter the flare and then target the discharge in the graveyard. No. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like he's just gonna discharge the Lord now, and then if he draws an untapped land, we can Flash with counterspell, and he'll feel nice and safe with that line. And looks like
found something.
Yeah, it looks like that's white, and then red. And with only one card in hand, he knows it's totally safe to tap out and do this. And the life totals suddenly flip. Nikachu down to 14, Nikachu down to 11, Johnny up to 14. And in just 2 turns, Nikachu is going to be dead to this Flage if he doesn't do something.
Wait, Mason, I just realized Johnny had a counterspell in hand and didn't hold up counterspell. This might be the first time the whole tournament.
Yeah, you know, and it's, you know, basically he knew he didn't need it this turn, right? Before, there could have been subtleties and flare denials that could have got his Flage. You didn't want that to happen. And now she was like, all right, here's an Aether Vial. I think you can beat that, Bucky.
You want to counter this one, Johnny?
Yeah, and Johnny attacks in, deals the Helix into Nikachu, down to 8, Flage down to 2. And now, even if Nikachu somehow stabilizes against this Flage, every other bolt and type card in the deck is lethal.
It's a blue card.
Not the one.
Quite tell what it was.
I believe it's a Harbinger, the 1-drop, the Tide Shaper. And we're just going to lose 2 life to our Dismember. And Johnny's going to go up game 1 over Nikachu here. 1 match away from being our 10K Modern Champion with the first Modern Horizons tournament of ever, really. So we'll have to see what he's going to do as we check out Nikachu's sideboard. We have 3 Spreading Seas, 3 Harbinger of Tides, 3 Shining Tidebinders, 3 Subtlety, 2 Merfolk Trister, 1 Dismember. Devin, what do you like and why?
So we saw Nikachu play against Ryan Bellamy in the last match, and similar concept here. Not quite exactly the same number of things. Like the card that I'm thinking about is Deshana's Tidebinder, where in the previous matchup, Ryan had the One Ring and Solitude as additional, ETBs that counter off of to stifle the trigger of. There's not really a ton here from Johnny. I mean, I guess Snapcaster Mage, maybe Tamiyo, but I don't know if you want to go towards those Tidebinders. Probably, I mean, same thing with Subtlety, right? There's not a ton of creatures here for Johnny. So those cards that I think were previously very good against Ryan, not quite as good in this matchup. And to be honest with you, looking at the sideboard, there's not a ton that I like here, Mason.
Yeah, we're going to have to see what he's going to do at the end of the day. I agree. There is not a ton of things. I just know we got to get those Dismembers out of our deck.
Yeah,
that's all
maybe
I know.
Spreading Seas. And just as like a way to cycle and potentially like keep Johnny off of trying to cast a Flage.
Yeah, I can totally see that being the line. Now, let's take a look over at Johnny's sideboard and see what he's going to do with Jeskai Control. We have 3 Consigned Memory, 3 Drannith Magistrate, 2 Wear Tear, 2 Celestial Purge, 2 Subtlety, 1 Wrath Disguise, 1 Force Negation, 1 Dress Down. What do you like here, Devin, and why?
Subtlety I think is pretty good, both for pitch casting early to like stave off a lot of early pressure and just card casting it on 4 mana. So I like that card a lot. Consign to Memory, maybe you could sell me into play against Vile, but it's probably too narrow. Give me the Wrath of the Skies. The Dress Down, I believe, is pretty good. Can maybe set up the spot where you get like Nikachu has a bunch of Lords in play and you can maybe like sort of fog. Not really a full fog, but kind of like a half a fog. So the Wrath, the Dress Down, the Subtleties for sure. I think that's probably about it.
Yeah, and we'll see what they do, but I like where your head's at on that one. So as we shuffle up here really quick, if you're liking this event, make sure to follow and meet us out in Chicagoland, July 13th and 14th. We have another Modern 10K Showdown for you going on Saturday and Sunday. we have a Legacy 5K. So if you love Paper Legacy, come on out, game. There is a lot of fun to be had. Pretty big Legacy scene in that area in the Chicago land there. Excuse me. You had 12 hours of coverage is catching up to me there. But yeah, come on out and support the future events. And like I said, follow. All these events are going to be streamed. We even stream the local in-game events at the store from NRG. So check those out. And it looks like Johnny's double checking his sideboard. We get an idea of what he wants. Looks like he cut the invoke polarities. He was just like, don't want those.
Yeah,
Funky.
that one seems not super great because, like, I mean, what's the best case scenario? It's like if you get a 2-mana 2/2, Johnny doesn't play any other Merfolk. It's like actively bad against Harbinger because you need to be able to counter that thing. You don't want to steal it.
Mm-hmm. So I had to see.
That was pretty funny that one time when Johnny was playing its Living End.
Yeah,
like those coin flips. Like the sweats were so real with that card.
Yeah, it is not all upside, right? Like, yes, there are lots of spots where it's really good, but it is not like, oh, I'm never gonna have anything bad happen. Against like Wraths, for example, sometimes you want to protect your flames or something, and you've got to hope the coin flip goes right. Oof. Devin, we have seen 11 rounds of Magic over 30 feature matches between everything going on. We've just been going through it all. There's been so much Magic here today, and I'm excited to see who is going to be the winner here. Johnny up a game, but Nikachu can still take us to game 3 and potentially win it all. Being on the play helps a lot. He has Aether Vial, Cavern of Souls. Those cards are going to matter a ton in this matchup. And if he can, maneuver around cards like Galvanic Discharge, he could be setting himself up for success. Gotta say, loving what I'm seeing so far from MH3.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this set has been phenomenal. Like I said, the amount of cards that we've seen come across and the amount of different like strategies that we've seen. I've been loving this set, and has really reinvigorated my my love and passion for the format.
I love to hear it. Makes my cold Scrooge heart grow in size. Love to see someone die to Summoner Pact. Love to hear them enjoy Modern a little more.
Man, I'll never get over that. The Summoner's Pact game with the Wrath of the Skies, that was a classic.
All-timer. I gotta say, I love Summoner's Pact. One of my best friends locally, one of his more infamous story moments is he's playing for the top 8 of a PTQ, and his opponent draws and misses the Summoner Pact, and he like kind of pops out of his chair and goes, "You lose!" to the opponent, and it's someone he knew, so it's all good. But
that's awesome.
It's one of the better Magic stories I've ever heard. It's just the pop up, "You lose!"
Yeah, just take the pack and throw it at him.
Mm-hmm. And Lord knows I've lost to my own Summoner's Pact. I used to play a lot of Gruul Valakut when I first started playing Modern, and the first couple of times you draw and you just have to take your L, and it's part of the price with the card. It should have a drawback. It's free.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever was in a situation where that happened to me or one of my opponents.
Mm-hmm. I remember very clearly the first time it happened to me after the rules changed, because I didn't know the rules had changed.
Oh, okay.
And my opponent like draws,
like go to concede the game or whatever.
We both just legitimately missed it because we were just in like a kind of a heated game that was going back and forth. And then we're like, he's moving to attacks. And I'm like, wait, didn't you pack last turn? Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh. And he's like, what do I do? And I was like, well, I think you lose. We should just call a judge. And so we call the judge, and the judge is like, new rules, pay the pack whenever you can now. And so we had to pay it mid-combat.
What if so in that situation, if you have mana on your upkeep, but you don't have mana in combat, it's just you're just
if
out.
You are a nefarious person who wanted to scum people, you could wait until they tap their thing and be like, oh my god, didn't you have a pact? And then they wouldn't have their mana. If you're an honorable soul,
stack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This isn't the time for I could do a whole video essay. Spice 8 Rack did 4 hours on Khans of Turkey. I can do 6 on Summoner's Pact. All right. So this is not the time for that. I'm 12 hours into commentary. I didn't sleep much last night.
That's
Johnny. He's mulligan down to 6. That's good news if you're a Nikachu fan.
Look at the floodgates that we've opened now. SC Twitch chat. posting some
Mhm.
videos. So we'll stop talking about it. Anyways, Johnny, go ahead and take a mulligan. Nikachu, I say Johnny and Jonathan. Nikachu is going to, I believe, keep 7. We talked about predictions. I did say Johnny was going to win. You picked Nikachu. I still think Johnny is favorite. Johnny up a game. I think that Johnny also improves a lot more during sideboarding. Like we took a look at Nikachu's sideboard, and I think Nika is very prepared for the combo matchups, but I don't think he really has a ton for these kind of like more fair bunch of 1-for-1 decks.
Agreed. Now I will say this: Nikachu might not have a lot of tools, but didn't like Johnny's sideboard a ton. So if Nikachu catches him, maybe not ready for one of those sideboard cards like a subtlety, then it might be huge. Also, I mean, we didn't talk about it much. Maybe he just put in spreading seas just to like try and like mess up Johnny's mana and get a cantrip. I doubt it, but maybe we'll see some interesting stuff. As it does look like we're drawing up our hand, and we're going to immediately bottom that triumph. Rest of the hand is gasoline.
Yeah, you want the triumph on the bottom because you just want to be able to fetch it.
True. And we're going to go Island Aether Vial, Spell Snare in hand.
And now here's the question: does Nikachu play around the Spell Snare with the Vial in play? I mean, probably. Like you probably just want to wait till you're probably going to just want to win in the Vial anyways. But it kind of depends on the hand, right? If you have a lot of 2s.
Well, I don't think he has any 2s.
Oh, okay. Well,
I think I think he's playing on the Spell Snare by just not drawing 2s. Which honestly, expert maneuver, masterfully played. Yeah.
So his hand is Tidebinder, Sphaloon, Force Negation, Flare, I think.
I think it was Subtlety, but yeah, it was one of the other free cards. His hand's just 3s. 3s and 3s with like quotation marks,
Three. No, his hands is 3s and freeze.
Yeah, 3s and freeze. Ooh, I like that. And it looks like Johnny's figuring out, am I supposed to fetch and get like a Surveyor Land? Am I supposed to fetch and get a Triumph? Do I get a basic to play around Harbinger? Because from Johnny's perspective, this play makes a lot of sense if you're Nikachu, right? You have an Aether Vial. You don't have any reason to put a Lord into play, especially when Johnny's representing Discharge and Spell Snare, and the game's going to last a while. So Johnny can't read too much into it. Now, next turn, when the Vial doesn't put anything in, if you don't draw a 2-drop, he can infer some stuff. But for now, he's having to think a lot about what's going on.
Yeah, and this is kind of going to be interesting to see how this hand from Nikachu plays out. Very, very slow. But like you said, it is possible because the game, like Nikachu expects the game to go a lot longer because Johnny's going to be interacting with him at basically every stage, that I wonder if he's more interested in a hand like this, especially once you get to that 3rd mana source and or Vial on 3. You really open up a lot of play with those Tidebinders because, if Johnny holds the fetch lands and things like that. Yeah, and maybe Johnny is prioritizing fetching early specifically because of those Tidebinders, right? Doesn't want to get himself into a spot where he's, leaves him uncracked. Nikachu has a Vial on 3 and 3 mana, and it's just, where do we go from here?
Yep. I love this early fetch of a mountain, just playing around the Harbinger. You see him, the players are talking, you see him kind of like, be like, yeah, well, if you've got it, I don't want to be dead to it. As Johnny is going to get to untap here. We know Nikachu doesn't have anything that he can play proactively at the moment. Next turn, though, fireworks are going to start going.
Yeah, he can Vial in the Lord right now, I guess. Likely will not really even care about fighting over it. Like, even if he had the opportunity to with Force, probably would never want to do that. We see Johnny main phase fetching for a basic, and I presume, Johnny, aware of the Tidebinders in the sideboard, just wants to get those fetches out as soon as possible. So gets to play around kind of the best of both worlds, right? You get to play around the Tidebinders and you get to play around the Harbingers.
Yeah, from a design standpoint, it would be cool if Merfolk got a 3-drop that wasn't just like, I hate your mana or whatever. But, we'll work on that. The technology, the Magic's been around 30 years, hopefully 30 more. And it is looking to be the end of turn. And we talked about this before. Nikachu has the Lord, finally something we can put into play that makes a little bit sense time-wise to do. But it might just get killed. But is
Well,
he
it's
okay with that?
the thing is because Nikachu's hand is all threes, I don't think you care if it gets killed because you're in a spot where you like even if you knew it was gonna die, you have to tick up the vial at the 3 next turn. And honestly, I kind of just like shattering the vial here. You saw Nikachu missed a land drop last turn, didn't play anything in the first couple of turns. Yeah, and we're just gonna fire it off because if Nikachu doesn't draw a land here, we may just be maybe in a spot where we can't cast spells, and I think you probably have to fight over this if you're Nikachu.
Yeah, I think you're Nikachu. You're forced on the force negation. And honestly, the question to me is, what card do you pitch? Subtlety
What if
is
you
like
just
my.
pitch the 2?
Yeah, you could just pitch the two. Like honestly, the two's like mid plus right now, and
Right, yeah.
subtlety is kind of awkward, but it could be goaded. So it's a really weird position to be in.
I
It looks
want
like
to I want to see him pitch the 2 just so you can just not resolve the vial trigger.
yeah, it'd be very funny. And you see Nikachu, he's kind of, very theatrical. I love his at table demeanor, just enjoying Magic, having a lot of fun. You can tell he's kind of like, what am I supposed to do here? And this is a nice turn if he forces pitch the subtlety, untap, maybe plays another lore, takes his vial up to 3. Then if Johnny tries to fetch, he can stifle it. So a lot of pressure could be coming down here. As it looks like the subtlety is going to go, we're going to try and take a more aggressive posture this game.
Yeah.
As
No.
the vial trigger is finally looks like we didn't put in with a vial.
Ooh.
Maybe it was intentional. Maybe it wasn't.
Perhaps.
This Tide Shaper kind of nice, can turn.
I think he's just realizing it. Okay. Yeah, I feel like that wasn't. I'm pretty sure he wanted to put it in. Because if he didn't want to put it in, then he probably would have pitched it to the force negation. But alas, here we are. But still has the vial on 3. Can hang on to the Tidebinder, potentially leave up that in or the Sphaloon, and I'm just gonna cast it. I guess
play it. Yeah,
Tide Shaper.
I mean, you can Tide Shaper here and turn off a red, or I believe it's only non-basic lands. So
I thought it was any land.
If it's any land, you definitely go after this white land here, since it's the outlier. But yeah. I can't quite remember. And honestly, at this point,
target land. There you go.
Oh yeah, basics aren't safe in this neighborhood. All right, island going down.
And there is the galvanic discharge. So that can take care of the Tide Shaper for Johnny. So that answers that problem at least. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Sphaloon gives the Merfolk ward, right? So if Johnny casts discharge, Nikachu responds, puts in the Sphaloon, there's no window, right?
Correct. But if we cast this Flage, we can vial in the Sphaloon with the Flage on the stack.
True.
And then have to pay the 1. And you probably want to put Sphaloon. You could also just Tidebind to the trigger.
Oh, yeah, the damage trigger. I was going to say, yeah. And then the Flage would still die. Okay. Interesting. And then maybe Johnny can go discharge. You probably discharge the Tide Shaper now. I guess we're going to hold on to it. Yeah, I guess you can just... Maybe you don't need the white mana quite yet. I mean, you want the white mana eventually for next turn.
I think this makes sense because it lets you play around force negation being like pitch cast. Now, I think if you're going to do that, you probably wanted to do it sooner. But also, Johnny knows Nikachu has a 2-drop and has Spell Snare in hand, right? The way Nikachu acted, he definitely had a 2. And if it's a Lord, which is the most likely 2, Johnny holding up this Spell Snare is a great way to make sure he doesn't take a bunch of damage out of nowhere.
Yeah. Now, I guess you don't even have to fight over the Tide Shaper now because you have the Island Plains, quote unquote, which you can filter that into gate for double white, and then Mountain Falls is double red. So you don't even have to care about the Tide Shaper. You just have perfect mana anyways. So Johnny can just kind of go about his business. And potentially we could see something like, shock in Steam Vents, play the Flage, kill something, hold up the discharge. And Nikachu did have to pitch that subtlety. He really, really tanked on that force negation, and for good reason, because he knew that this was a possibility of this game eventually getting to the point where the Flage gets cast, and this is exactly what we've seen Johnny do to every creature deck he's played against all day.
Yep. Now, Nikachu can Vial in Saloon and force the ward to happen. That will allow, the tap out here and maybe give him a little bit of space, but it's definitely a bad place to be.
I guess what you could also do is just stifle. Yeah, you could just, I guess, Tidebinder the Flage and make it a 6/6 vanilla. Okay.
Yeah, okay. And now if you get the Lord of Atlantis into play, all these creatures will have Island Walk, and you can attack in. Now we know Johnny has. Oh, I like this. No, he has the no effects little tab. But yeah, this is weird. Where Johnny is like, okay, I know you have a 2-drop from 4 turns ago now, so I can't tap out, but I do want a Galvanic Discharge. And this is actually such a big brain play here from Nikachu. He's going to activate the Vial on 3, and if Saloon comes down, he won't be able to discharge, and this forces Johnny's hand. Now, Johnny's just going to float a red to play around the Harbinger.
Oh, he played around the Harbinger, but not the Saloon. Oh, my goodness.
And then he's going to attack for
Lord. Oh, my God.
And look at Nikachu, sits back in his chair. He's like, gotcha. And he's going to move on to game number 3 here. As you see Johnny, who has done a masterful job of playing around stuff all day today, played around the Harbinger perfectly. Not the Saloon plus Lord combo, which he knew the Lord was there. Yeah.
That was ridiculous.
And you see, too, Johnny thought it was the Harbinger of the Moon, the new blue Blood Moon. Incredibly well played there by Nikachu, knowing he kind of, forced Santa. We're going to pick it up as we go to game number 3. And that was the turn. And Johnny knew there was a Lord, but he just couldn't risk losing his mana for the rest of the game.
I don't even know. I don't have words after that one, Mason. I am taken aback at how beautiful that game was played by both players. You saw that spot where Johnny floated the red mana, obviously was playing around the Harbinger of the Seas. Nikachu tanking on what to pitch the Force Negation to fight over the Vial. Like, both players had a ton of decisions that game, and I think both players played phenomenally, and that was a sight to watch, Mason.
Yeah, I'll say it. Modern rocks. These games rock. It is so exciting to see this kind of action happening and such high level play from both players, playing incredibly well, a lot of posturing, a lot of maneuvering. And, I'll say it, right? A long time, Merfolk's been kind of a joke of Modern, right? And we've talked about it all day today as we've seen Nikachu in the rounds as he works his way into the finals, where it's like, it used to just be a deck where it's like Lords and Spreading Seas and Aether Vial, and that's it. And then MH2 came around. It's like, all right, so some Lords and some Chalices and some Subtleties and Forces. It's kind of like a Prison-y deck. Okay, it's pretty good at certain weekends, but maybe not the best deck ever. Now, I'm not saying it's the best deck ever, but it's really evolved into be this like, hey, with the way the metagame is and all my tools available to me, I am sort of the quintessential Merfolk deck. I am that tricksy sort of combat-y deck that players who love Merfolk really love. And for a long time, their deck kind of had to be morphed into different things to play the thing they love, but now they get to go back and do this, and it's so exciting. And the cool part about all this, Devin, is you can still do that other stuff. If you want to play Chalice on 1 and we're Chalice on 2, that kind of stuff's still available to you. This deck has only grown in options. It hasn't decreased. And it's so awesome to see someone who puts so much time in play so well. Now, not over yet, hasn't won, but he's doing a great job and putting himself in a position to.
Yeah, and kind of on the other side of things, you've seen sort of, you mentioned the evolution of Merfolk with the Horizon sets and as they've been printed, and kind of the evolution of the archetype itself. And Control, I kind of feel the same way, where you see a lot of creatures that you would normally not find in Johnny's deck list, like Tameo being a 1-drop, not necessarily a threat in and of itself, but a card advantage engine. And, it is threatening in the sense of when it flips, it gets to ultimate, et cetera, et cetera. And Flage, Flage has been the talk of the tournament today. Every time we've seen it on camera, it's been absurd. And what's nice about Flage is it gives these control decks a way to just close the gap, right? The big issue with Control is that it's always been, well, you get to a spot where you have nothing going on, maybe, who top decks better, but when you have access to Flage in your graveyard, who cares about top decks? You just cast a 6/6 that kills your opponent in 2 attacks.
Yeah, one of the big things that I really noticed when I used to play a lot of 4-color Control back when I was grinding the tournaments is my deck basically was really good at kind of killing everything, but then I couldn't really win. And really what Yorion did was it gave me a couple of cards when I was drawn, sure, and yeah, maybe I Flicker of Solitude or a Fury. Okay. In reality, Devin, it was just a 4/5 flyer. And having that like on suspend answer to sort of start closing the door and stop being control and turn into a Delver deck. That is what the 4-color deck really loved. And it's been able to succeed, but it's been harder at times for 4-color. Now these, Jeskaiing and 4-coloring decks, they have Flays, you're welcome. And it is able to close the door so quickly, right? And you talked about it earlier. It's a little bit of an overstated Lightning Helix early, and then in the late game, it is just your win condition. So that similar way that kind of Yorion was hanging out, hey, I'm going to win the game eventually. Flay's just doing that same thing from the graveyard, and you could fight over it. We've seen players, bring in Rest in Peace and Endurance and done a good job and been a real headache, but you do have to fight over it. So it's very interesting, and it's one of those things where kind of soft graveyard hate like Endurance kind of gets the job done, but hard graveyard hate like Rest in Peace really does, but then you're kind of giving up a card, so it's a really interesting mix here. Our players are running to the bathroom real quick before our game 3, so we're going to give you the magic as soon as it starts. Don't worry. They are shuffled up. They're just taking a little bathroom break here. But yeah, Flay's just been great. You'll love to see it.
Yeah, just absolutely phenomenal. Shout out to Johnny, by the way. I know we mentioned this earlier, but Johnny is, I believe he's fighting through appendicitis or something like, I think it was appendicitis. And, Johnny's been in some, I heard somebody in chat saying Johnny's been in some pain all day. So shout out to Johnny for being a trooper and made it all the way to the finals. And, we
playing so well.
Yeah, playing phenomenally too. He's been playing out of his mind.
What's that appendicitis medicine? We might need a little bit of that.
I know, right? We need
yeah. But no, this is really interesting and really kind of setting the stage for the Pro Tour next week, right, Devin? In about 5 days' time from this point, because of how time zones work, we're going to see the Pro Tour start, and it's going to be very interesting. A lot of players have to pick a deck, and one of the things I think is super interesting, Devin, is we're going to only scratch the surface. Those players aren't going to figure out every little thing that's in Modern Horizons 3. It took us basically years to figure out all the good cards and everything you can do with them from MH2. And, we didn't have a Pro Tour with that set, but the pros only had about 2.5 weeks to play, and they have to learn limited. So I expect we're going to see a lot of very safe and solid decks. Definitely some innovation. Sanctum for All, they've innovated every Pro Tour. I'm sure we're going to see that sort of thing happen. But, it's going to be interesting to see what exactly comes out of it. And then, honestly, what's the format look 3 months after that, right? Because it is so early still in this set's lifespan. And it's not like a normal set. OTJ, there's a couple cards, kind of heralded as a really strong set, Devin. 6-7 cards at most you could consider for Eternal formats. There's 6 or 7 cards you don't consider from MH3.
I know, right? It's been wild. When I was going through the set trying to figure out, when I was trying to build decks with all the new cards, and it was just I would spend the day, maybe a couple hours, build 10 or 15 decks. Next day, 10 or 15 decks, and there's just never been a set where I go through the spoiler and it's I've built 70 plus decks at this point, and there's still things that I haven't tried and I haven't built yet. It's crazy to me how much that these sets like this change Modern, and ultimately it's for the good, because at the end of the day, maybe after a couple of years, format gets a little stale, and it's always nice to have that injection. Because I don't know about you, but the best time to play Modern is new MH set. First, maybe, a couple of months. Love that.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And I am so glad that it, has been so much fun. And we've seen so many returning cards. Imagine, Devin, I told you a year and a half ago, Snapcaster Mage was going to be in the finals of a Modern tournament, and there'd be other ones in the top 16. It's not just one person. Snapcaster Mage is really back, and it's so exciting to see this sort of thing. Now, hopefully it stays that way for months to come. But no matter what, this exciting period of discovery really is cool. And Devin, I have this theory that learning is fun. That's my big game designer hot take, is that learning is fun. The secret is you just spent years learning stupid algebra that you probably didn't need. Sorry to everyone who needs algebra. And so you didn't really like it. But what's always the most fun times in Magic, Devin? When we're learning new things, we're trying stuff. And these Modern Horizon sets are just a huge injection of new things to puzzle, new things to think about, in so many different directions. And after we go a direction for a little bit, was there something else we can do to respond to that? And the history of Magic, it's just so exciting.
Speaking of Snapcaster Mage, Mason, did you actually think that, or I guess what's the best way to phrase this? Did you have Snapcaster Mage in a lot of the decks that you were testing with these cards?
I remember playing with the Snapcaster Mage because it's very nice with flare denial, especially early on. it was one of those things where it's like, okay, this might be the way to do it, because if you go like bolt, snap, bolt, and then I flare your next spell, that's a great way to do it. So I definitely played with flare, with Snapcaster, but I don't think anyone, you don't really want to know, right? Like if you know that kind of thing, it's kind of a bad omen.
Yeah,
so anyways, Cavern of Souls into Tide Shaper, and no counter spells this game. I love it.
I see a lot of blue cards in Johnny's hand. Probably not happy to see that Cavern of Souls. I think it's Counterspell, Subtlety, Tune the Narrative, Flage Land.
Yep. And I gotta say, I talked a lot here. Nikachu, every time he's like makes a big play, he sits his hands down, crosses his arm, and goes, "Go." He's just like, I've presented you with a problem. What would you like to think of this one? And this time it's the Cavern of Souls, and I love it. I can't get enough of it. It looks like Johnny is going to fetch up a Hallowed Fountain and maybe a little Tune the Narrative.
Yep. So we're going to tune the band a little bit. Johnny really needs to try and find, Sand's not too bad. Just needs some lands, hit a bunch of land drops for those Flages, and maybe try and find something like a Discharge to help clear an early Lord. Maybe like a Wrath of the Skies. Maybe Nikachu overextends into a Wrath of the Skies. Mason. We've drawn the single dress down.
All right.
Here's the thing. We had the option to do this in one of the previous rounds, and Johnny chose not to do it. Or maybe there was a reason for it. On a mulligan on the play with your hand like this, surely you go for it this time, right?
Yeah, I think
especially against the Cavern.
Yeah, I think it's just you need to make your land drops.
Chose not to go for it.
All right. Well, looks like we just have Stone Cold, nothing really. You do have Wrath of the Skies for X's 1. Yeah. I have to imagine you're going to take a little bit more damage before you do that sort of play.
Maybe because Johnny didn't have the third land in hand, he wants to wait on the dress down until he draws land 3 so that he can guarantee the dress down into Flage line.
Honestly, at this point, I think Johnny really just needs to get the land. So that's why I was pro fetching. Like, even if we were going to do it main phase 2, you know what I mean? Like, if you want to kill it, fine. Let's just get our mana, because we have got to start getting something here. I'm a little surprised not to even see a Surveil land fetch there.
Yeah, that too.
Especially because, we saw game 2, he played around, and honestly, this might be an overcorrection here. In game 2, we played around the Harbinger of the Sea so well, right? We fetched all our basics. We were making sure not to get Tidebindered. And this game, we ended up losing, right? Playing around that card so much. Maybe that's what's happening here. It's hard to know.
Yeah, this is a weird spot here. So, Johnny, we're going to fetch main phase. Now, I wonder if that means we're just going to main phase the dress down like you mentioned to try and cycle. And we are going to fetch not a basic. Okay, I wants to make sure we have double white for the Wrath as well as red mana for the Flage. Understandable. And I guess we could just be wrathing. No, we're gonna dress down. Yeah, I feel like if maybe
did you see Nikachu's face? Sorry, continue.
No, I didn't see it.
His eyes got super big. Yeah, he's like an animated character. He was like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah, I'm questioning if you were gonna do this main phase, maybe you're supposed to do it end step. Not sure here.
Yeah, I think what's happening is Johnny really values the dress down as a way to remove Island Walk, remove the buffing.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what he's like, yeah, I can do the Flage thing, but I'd much rather just try to leave the land in my deck. If I'm not going to fetch a Surveil land, I'm just going to, leave the land, try and hope to just draw it. And then I'll play my Flage, kill his creature, sort of, build out a little bit. And if, Nikachu ends up playing a Harbinger of the Seas while it turns off the Cavern, maybe I can counterspell enough, and find a kill spell and win the game. But
Nikachu is are we thinking about forcing this?
Yeah, I think Nikachu's trying to figure out. I mean, honestly, Ryan Bellamy is living in Nikachu's head rent-free from the top 4, because he's like, honestly, I've seen some people do some messed up things with dress down, and I don't know what's going on here. Now, this might also be a situation where he just wants to get the creature in play. And this is super interesting because the subtlety is in hand for Johnny.
You kind of have to subtlety this, especially because those counter spells they're just dead cards, right?
Yeah, I imagine this is a subtlety, but the super interesting part is Nikachu could have waited and played around subtlety bouncing his creature, but then subtlety would be in play. So by doing this, he's actually playing around Johnny evoking a subtlety just as a blocker, which I think is maybe what Nikachu was thinking. Like, oh, you're trying to make your land drops and maybe put blockers in play against me.
Oh, now I guess we don't know. I'm assuming the dress down is on the stack and not the trigger on the stack. I guess we
I
can get
think so.
clarification on that, but that would be my guess.
Yeah, I think so as well. Because I think Nikachu would have postured something like trigger on the stack. I'm gonna do this here. Yeah, and you see him sacrifice it to just force spike. Yeah, because I think Nikachu thought there's going to be a little bit of pressure coming down that way, and a very heads up line once again. Ryan Bellamy's kind of living rent free there, so we are going to see Sveloon with a cavern, but it's going to get subtletied.
I wonder if Nikachu is thinking about Flare Sack Hexcatcher.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it is not the worst line. Sveloon is one of those cards that wins the game. Now, I think Nikachu's in a spot where your opponent missed your land drop. You can kind of afford to wait. But if he was in a slightly worse position, you know what I mean? I think, honestly, flaring there would be pretty reasonable. Just get the 3-4 down.
Yeah, there's probably no rush there. You can just put it on top, wait an extra turn, not a huge deal, no harm, no foul. And I mean, it's still going to be good next turn. Now, granted, Johnny did find land 3, so Johnny can maybe go for like Flage to kill the Hexcatcher, and then 5 cards in the graveyard, set up something there. And that would be my guess, because the counterspell is not doing much, and your Wrath of the Sky is just going to get Hexcatchered. So I'm assuming that Johnny's just going to go crack fetch, Flage the Hexcatcher, and try to draw another land next turn.
I think so. And getting the Flage going is pretty nice. You also have Wrath of the Skies for the ability to do 3 if you spend the mana. So that's an available line to Johnny to answer the Sveloon, which we all know is on top. Yeah, and Nikachu here in an interesting spot. I don't think has a subtlety, and even if he did, probably would rather subtlety the brought back Flage.
Yeah, and this is such a weird spot too, because you're gonna lose the Hexcatcher, cast the Sveloon, but then you're now in a spot. Okay, you can just bounce the Flage, right? You can let the Flage resolve. Sveloon is 4 toughness; it doesn't die to the Flage. You just go untap and stupor the Flage, right?
I think so. And so the question is Nikachu going to play one ahead of time tapped? It looks like he's going to try and bank on drawing a island off the top to have it. And we're going to see Wrath the Skies come down here. 3 mana Wrath is going to give the energy up to 3. And you see Nikachu's like, ooh, that's a good one.
That's exactly enough. And honestly, Nikachu's hand is not super great. The leftovers are 2 Sink into Stupors, a Lord, and a Flare. So, I mean, you can flare this, but you're going to lose the creature either way, so it doesn't matter. I guess you can go...
All right. Well,
third Sink into Stupor.
The third Sink, it gives you an out against the Flage, and I think you just kind of have to bolt this in and pass. Because if you tap out and Johnny draws the land, you just kind of lose the game on the spot because it kills the Lord, you have no pressure. Now, your Cavern of Souls, if you can just draw a land, you just do that. Or if, you can put another Stupor as land.
He drew a Harbinger of the Tides. Well, that's pretty good, because that's going to cut off that's going to make that Flage completely uncastable.
In the words of Larry David, pretty good. As we are going to see double Cavern.
Interesting.
Super can't be countered. And I think what Nikachu is doing is he's setting up next turn having the Stupor plus the Harbinger if he draws a land, and has flare up this turn in case any sort of Lord of Atlantis stuff. Because he also, right now, Johnny could just, kill spell.
I actually kind of like countering this. Maybe you because you kind of want the land for next turn, right? Maybe you flare.
I think you stupor it and you just slam your Magus of the Moon.
You can stupor, and then if you draw like some random other creature, you can go like Harbinger plus that, hold up flare, sack the random creature.
It also gives you an out if you draw an untapped land. It turns the island into a good draw. So it gives you a lot of chances to, convert some bad draws into good draws, which we've seen Nikachu do a great job of. Now, to be honest, Flare denying it, reasonable line too. It makes it not go back to hand. So if a Plains is drawn, it isn't the end of the world. But decides that this is the line and draws a subtlety.
Wow. Yeah. So surely we jam the Harbinger this turn.
Yeah, I think this is the turn, and Nikachu told us about it. He's like, the thing my Harbinger's been the best at all weekend is getting these blue control decks, and Johnny doesn't play 2 Plains. He just has 1. We're not going to get to Wrath the Skies anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think this game is essentially just over because Johnny's only out. His hand is all bricks right now. Johnny's only out is draw discharge, but Nikachu has the discharge covered. We have the subtlety and we have a flare of denial. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think this one is just about wrapped up, Mason.
I think so too. And I think Nikachu very smartly was like, I think Johnny would have main phased a Snapcaster Mage attune to try and make land drops. So I'm just not going to play around Snap, because you saw him start to play around Snap as the little ambush viper was like, nope, actually that card's not there. I don't need to worry about it. Very
And
heads up play.
honestly, even if funny we draw the basic island, even
Yeah.
if Snapcaster comes off the top, it's not a big deal, right? Because you can't trade for the Harbinger. It's only for the Lord of Atlantis. And you still get to keep the most important threat in play, so it's not that big of a deal. And yeah, Nikachu's just gonna crack in there for 5, gonna put Johnny to 1, and with the Flare of Denial, I don't think there's any outs here for Johnny.
I don't think there is either. And he drew a Snapcaster Mage, but without a discharge in the graveyard, I don't think he can do anything. He can maybe attune, he could snap attune, draw discharge. But then if he does that, I think he's technically at 1, I believe. I think our life total hasn't caught up. I could be mistaken. But I think that, Johnny's in trouble here. And you see him taking a moment trying to figure out. He has victory so close. And it looks like Snapcaster is the thing. And Nikachu might just flare denial the Snapcaster Mage.
Could subtlety it too. I think there was a subtlety in Nikachu's hand.
Oh, subtlety is a backbreaker for sure, because then you get the 3/3 on the board.
Yep.
You could flare sacrificing the subtlety. So you kind of got it all locked up. And Nikachu been playing really great all weekend, just making sure in this last second he's not throwing it away. And congratulations, Merfolk wins the first big Modern Horizons 3 event. Congratulations to both those players. Johnny played incredibly well, only losing in the finals. Nikachu played masterfully. We saw and lost. His only loss all weekend, Devin, was the
was
mirror.
the mirror. Yeah.
Round 3 got by someone, probably, part of the Discord. They probably hang out and talk. He got, and you know what? 1 out. So we're going to get an interview with Nikachu in a minute. But congratulations. And Merfolk, it's winning here, but also when you kind of look at it, it kind of makes a lot of sense, right? You got a little bit of interaction for Ruby Storm. You got like mana hate for the Tron decks. For these like Flage decks, we see the Harbinger is such a problem because not everyone's building their mana base with this card in mind. So it's very exciting to see. Congratulations once again to Johnny for putting up a great finish with that Jeskai Wizards deck. I think it was great. I can't wait to play with it. It looks like a lot of fun. And battling through the appendicitis pain too, and playing so well in that much pain, cannot imagine doing that. So seriously, great congratulations to you and getting that second place. Hopefully we see you tomorrow playing Pioneer. But Devin, what do you think? Merfolk, it did it.
I know. I mean, I got to be honest with you, Mason. When we started the broadcast today, and I started watching all the coverage, I definitely did not think we would end up here with all of the talk around the talk of the town being Nadu and Storm and the resurgence of Living End and all this stuff. But it turns out all you got to do is just tried and true Merfolk. And to be honest with you, I mean, it's a good recipe. It has a lot of, it has a fast clock and has a lot of disruption along the way between the Tide Shapers. Like there's this really, effective mana denial plan. If you look at Nikachu's deck, there's 4 Tide Shaper, 3 Harbinger, 2 Dockhand. So a lot of ways to tax mana, Hex Catcher, more free spells with Flare of Denial. Sink into Stupor, which came up a couple of times. So it really does seem like MH3 has some really, really good upgrades for this deck. And, it does seem like it's fast enough to race the combo decks and interactive enough to beat the other decks too.
Yeah, and we said, if he beats Ryan Bellamy, so it was looking pretty good. And here is the man himself. Congratulations, Nikachu. How's it feel to get the trophy in the first Modern Horizons 3 tournament taken down by your pet deck? Played incredibly well, mind you.
Oh yeah, it feels amazing. This is great. But you know what? I have to give a special shout out to all the Nadu players out there for wiping out all my scam opponents. They cleared the way for Merfolk all the way to the finals and a victory. I basically got tons of great matchups all day long. And it was only because apparently Nadu has a great matchup versus scam. Because the only thing I lose to in leagues online when playtesting for this event is scam. Scam. I was like, oh, you ruined my 5-0. Oh, you even ruined my 4-1, and I can beat basically everything else. Or, sorry, and prowess, but like, Whatever. That was always a bad matchup.
Dex, the way people used to talk about Merfolk, you're talking about them now. You love to see it. So, what was sort of the big change? Because we had you in the booth earlier with your interview when you made your top 8. You told us about how Harbinger of the Seas, is beating the dog out of these Jeskai control decks, and then you did it in the top 4 in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
But what has changed about Merfolk that's allowed it to really take that step up and become, one of the decks that's winning these kind of big events from a deck that kind of didn't have a lot of game, 2 or 3 years ago?
I mean, definitely Harbinger of the Seas is going to elevate it to another level. I mean, it instantly kills all the Urza sagas. It can eat up Tron and Amulet, and it gives free wins. Like in that last game, and I told you, it eats up the control decks, strangely enough. And even in that game, they had a mountain. Usually the mountain is the counter to the Harbinger of the Seas, but it wasn't enough. I mean, like, they have this Superman intensive Flage, but that Flage is useless if you don't have, like, the extra red or white or anything else. And they have a lot of trouble just fetch out basic many times. So you get those basically free wins, and the game sort of turns into a game of, how do I get this Harbinger of the Season play and protect it at the same time? Which I tried to do in the first game, but I just failed miserably.
Yeah, and I honestly, when we saw the brackets and we saw you in the top 4 and the other side of the bracket too with the Jeskai control deck, I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't really believe it. I looked at the decks on paper and I thought that the Jeskai control deck was a little bit ahead, and I'm eating my words now. But apparently Harbinger is just that good. And it like even the sink into stupor, being able to bounce the flashback of Flage, like we were thinking that might have come up as well.
Absolutely.
And just a lot of stuff. And I think that matchup is maybe not as bad as it used to be.
No, so long as if you have a plan for Flage, which I do, we have this. That's the thing I was saying about, like, Sink into Stupor is actually better than Flare the Nile, because it can interact on that access. It can interact with, like, flashback cards from Snapcaster Mage. It basically can interact. They exile their entire graveyard for Flage. We bounce it back to their hand. Or just bounce anything that they play. I mean, they tap out all the time for, like, Teferi or the One Ring or this and that's a critical turn. Or even for Solitude. So for the versions that use Solitude and pitch a white spell, which they don't have too many of, and I even Sink into Stupor, they still now got to wait for another white source in order to basically take a shot at Harbinger of the Seas again.
Yeah, and that's I think a very astute point, right? Solitude's kind of at a low right now with some of these decks, right? They're Jeskai, but they're really blue-red splashing white for Wrath of the Skies, right? And Flage. So, that is a card. Maybe if you're a control mage, maybe you want to look more towards with this here. But I've got to ask you, I saw you looking online and you were talking about how maybe you're going to cut Aether Vial, and that was something you were talking about. How do you feel about that after this weekend? Because Vial, in some of your matches was great, other times very awkward. Is it still too much of a sacred cow, or do you think there's still a lot of room to explore with the Merfolk deck?
Well, there's definitely a lot of room to explore, but the only reason I would remove Aether Vial was to give me more game versus Scam, because Vial is just awkward, and I want... Vial can be okay versus Scam because it can become a tempo war, but I would prefer to have, like, Lorien revealed instead. Give me some opportunity to draw some cards. I'll try to chew up your Bowmaster. I'll try to draw some cards and actually get back into this game. But that would be the only reason. But if Scam is going to be kept in check by Nadu, I'm going to keep the Aether Vials, because Aether Vials is just going to be too important versus Nadu. Versus in the Merfolk mirror, let me tell you, if you have no Aether Vials in the Merfolk mirror, you're doomed. You absolutely have to have Aether Vial in the Merfolk mirror.
Yeah, there was one last question I wanted to ask you, or I guess just kind of mention this one play. There was, I think it was game 2, which was the game where you had the double dockhand and he had, like, a fetch land in play, and you get to the spot where you dockhand one of his lands. He cracks the fetch land, gets the basic mountain to play around the Harbinger, and then you just have that whole sequence was kind of wild. Talk to me. What was going on through your head in that situation?
I wanted to see what my opponent was going to do with that Scalding. I think it was a Scalding Tarn, because it could fetch a mountain. And so I just wanted, because they were being patient with this land the entire time. And I was getting to a point where I sort of have to make a move. They're going to have enough lands to cast their cards. Like, they're just making their land drops. So I said, okay, it's do or die now. You figure out what you want to do. Like most of the time, I'm guessing they're going to get the go fetch out a basic mountain. But I don't know. So anyway, I was just trying to force the action, and then followed up with Harbinger of the Seas, and then we took it from there.
Nice. Well, so you've won our showdown. That means you got a nice little chunk of change. You're now invited to our end of the year championship event. That's
right.
going to be a PTQ as well. And you've won a token. And so I got to ask, are you going to pick what are you going to pick? Are you going to be Merfolk? You're going to be Energy? I got to say this. I know I've watched you play a good bit on Energy now. You're very charismatic. You have a lot of energy.
Oh, yes, I had the whole Yugi thing the entire time. Thank you to all my opponents that tolerated me acting like Yugimoto.
Yeah, go back and watch the coverage. We mentioned it.
You fetched a land. That is an activated ability. You have fallen right into my trap with the Tishana's Tidebinder, which counters activated abilities. So I had a lot of fun. Yeah, so I played like that the entire time. I had so much fun, actually, in this tournament, because I would draw like a bomb. I was like, I'm not going to lie to you. I drew the best card in my deck. Usually it didn't matter because I was ahead anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But
nice.
anyway, so in terms of the token,
so you don't have to. It's not locked in now. We just kind of want what the early gut check is.
I mean, maybe some sort of what is my creature that like gives me Island Walk? Tide Shaper. Maybe there's some sort of Tide Shaper token, because this is a visual thing that I constantly need. But other than that, maybe the Hexproof 1/1 Merfolk token, because let me tell you, I accidentally won this tournament. I wasn't expecting to win this tournament. This was a complete accident. But I intend on winning tomorrow, because tomorrow is Pioneer, and I am extremely well prepared. I'm going to unleash, for the first time in a large Pioneer paper event, Merfolk in Pioneer. And let me tell you, I'm not lying, it is better, more powerful in Pioneer than it is in Modern and Legacy combined, even with these Modern Horizon 3 cards. So I'm very excited. And that, like, I make a billion of these 1/1 hexproof tokens in that format.
A fascinating take. I can't wait to see it. Dom Harvey won the back-to-back. Maybe you can as well. But yeah, maybe we can get you a little like forest with you holding a sign that says this is an island. Could be a cute token. We'll get in touch with you on how to do that later. But thank you so much for taking a little bit of time to talk to us. Any shout outs here before you go and get to go enjoy the rest of your night?
Shout out to the Merfolk community. They believed in me the entire time. Shout out to my local game store, Fusion Gaming Online. Shout out to them. And lastly, shout out to NRG Series. I absolutely would not be here without the coverage that exists over here. And I'm going to absolutely I already booked my tickets. I'm going to be there in Chicagoland. I'm going to be there in Indianapolis, because hands down, if you are a person that wants to tell your story at a competitive level, start your story here at NRG Series.
Couldn't say it better myself. Thank you so much, Nikachu, for coming by. It was great to have you. And hopefully we see you make a run for our Player of the Year with going to all the events. That being said, we're going to let you go right now and go and get some dinner and relax before you release the beast, better known as Pioneer Merfolk. So with that all being said, we'll come back to the booth here, and Devin and I will wrap you up. Thank you all so much for coming here. Peak at about 2,000 viewers. It was great to have you all here for the release of MH3. This is one of my most anticipated tournaments personally of all time. I am so glad I got to share it with you all and with you, Devin. I had a blast commentating this. I did all 11 rounds today. I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to go fall asleep on the couch, but I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to watch the Pioneer coverage, because I've heard Merfolk, it's the beast. Sounds like a round one feature. I don't know. But if you don't want to miss that coverage, click the follow button right now, and we'll see you all tomorrow for some more action.